All right, so there we go. We have confirmation that we are recording today's presentation. So thank you everyone for joining us today on our last, this will be the third presentation on the chemistry and wastewater management. We've done two already, one in Mandarin, one in English, and this will be our last one in English here today. What I'm going to start the presentation on here is an introduction, a little bit of information about who the Apparel Impact Institute is, and then hand it over to a number of our guest speakers to walk through the content of our presentation here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Lepre. I am our programs director here at the Apparel Impact Institute, with oversight of all of our brand partnerships, primarily in North America, but also Europe, and look forward to sharing information on the chemistry program today. Oops. So with that, I also wanted to share briefly who some of our guest presenters will be today, a number of well-respected individuals in the industry, and look forward to having them talk here throughout the webinar. So with that, I'm going to cover a little bit of context, no more than a couple minutes here overall, about the Apparel Impact Institute. So the Apparel Impact Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit based here in the United States that was founded back in 2017. It is an organization related and associated with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. We have 4 key areas that we do focus our work on, and at a high level, it's related to identifying, funding, scaling, and measuring impact work specific to environmental impact in the industry. So for us, when we look at identifying different solutions, this is trying to find those best-in-class initiatives, projects, or market opportunities to deliver market impact at scale. As it relates to the funding side of our organization, as I mentioned, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, which allows us access to funding from our brand partners, the suppliers that we work with, in addition to a number of different philanthropic donors ranging from government development organizations to philanthropic family foundations. We're able to then use those different philanthropic dollars to support the impact work that we do around the globe. The third component of our work focuses on the concept of scale. So how can we use different principles and different methodologies to drive scale for the industry to achieve the environmental impact that we want to accomplish? And last but not least, I think all of us would agree that one of the critical and necessary components of the work is measurement. It has to be a component of everything that we do to be able to validate and stand behind driving impact as a number of organizations or the industry. We need that information, we need that data, and without that, it's really hard to validate or claim impact for the work that we're doing. So with that, if those are the 4 things that the Impact Institute focuses on, these are the 4 critical areas of our work. So as it relates to energy, anything from energy efficiency all the way through renewable energy. Water, looking at ways to increase process efficiency or looking at production innovations to reduce water. Chemistry, looking at how we can eliminate or reduce hazardous chemicals in production. And finally, materials, a newer area that we're starting to support more work in, ranging from circularity to innovative materials and the likes of that work. As we look out then to the different partnerships, so I mentioned at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see the different philanthropic partners. So anything from the government development organizations to some philanthropic family foundations to the likes of a bank who provides some philanthropic money to the Apparel Impact Institute. In the top left, what you'll see here is our founding and strategic partners. So back in 2017, these organizations provided both funding and strategic advice and direction for the organization, and continue to provide us support and insights as an organization today. And then on the top right, you'll see some of the different program partners that we work with. These brands are necessary and support our work. This is a sample of, it's not all inclusive of the brands that we work with. So these are the ones that are okay with us talking about and mentioning their brand names in the work that we are doing as an organization. So with that, that was a real quick and brief introduction to the Apparel Impact Institute, some of the work that we do, who we work with, but I know the important content and context for today's webinar is really focused around our chemistry and wastewater management work. So with that, I am going to go ahead and move the slide and hand it over to Tamara.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. My name is Tamara. I'm working for Sustainable Textile Solutions. We are a strategic partner of the Apparel Impact Institutes for a couple of years now. And later on, I will give you a little bit more of an introduction of the capabilities of Sustainable Textile Solutions and actually the context we are having here in this program. Next slide, please. So let me first give you a short program overview. So the Clean by Design Chemistry and Wastewater program is built on the best practice methodology that is a proven methodology for the energy and water work. And we have now applied it for the chemicals and wastewater treatment. So we are actually using existing and new tools to create a comprehensive and integrated path to set and achieve improvement targets. We have aligned very closely with the ZEHC. This is also why today Klaas Nuttbaum is on this call, because he will show us a bit more about how we have linked the program to the ZEHC. And then, of course, it's a collaborative and continuous improvement framework for wet processing facilities. More importantly, and that's what we see on the next slides, is the program outcome. So we are looking at the quantitative reduction of chemical consumption. And we don't only look at dyes and auxiliaries, but we also look at commodity and ETP chemicals. We look at the quantitative increase of ZEHC MRSL conforming chemicals. So here it's one of the few points where we don't want a decrease or reduction, but an increase. As a next point, we will achieve reduction of wastewater effluent nonconformities. We have a broad portfolio of ZEHC tools that we are using. So throughout the program, we will help the factories to achieve the supplier to zero foundational level. We prepare them for the progressive level, and here Klaas will tell a little bit more later. The participants will run through the ZEHC technical industry guideline training and the wastewater management trainings, both ZEHC trainings where they get the ZEHC certificate. And we are looking at the verified performance in check report, which is a rather new tool of the ZEHC. So that's the portfolio of program outcomes related to the ZEHC. And of course, the program should help the facilities to improve their HIC-FEN chemicals and wastewater management scoring, and is fully aligned. So now I'm coming to the part that I love the most, the implementation partners, and I'm very happy and proud that we are working with very strong partners here. So we have the ZEHC, Sustainable Textile Solutions, NMCATECH, and GOBLUE with the Beehive, and I let each of the partners introduce themselves. So Klaas, please start with giving us a short overview who or what the ZEHC is.
Thank you, Tamara. My name is Klaas Nuttbaum. I'm the implementation director of ZEHC. And ZEHC is a global multi-stakeholder initiative with more than 160 contributor partners. It is a foundation registered in the Netherlands, a not-for-profit organization. And we have one vision, that is the widespread implementation of sustainable chemistry, driving innovations and best practice in the textile, apparel, leather, footwear industries to protect consumers, workers, and the environment alike. And so this is also what it brings us here to work with our collaboration partners of AII Clean by Design to make sure that this program is also sound with our guidelines, our platforms and solutions. And I really appreciate the conversations we had over the last months to make this alignment. And I'm looking forward for this next cohort to implement on these solutions and platforms.
Thank you so much, Klaas. I will keep STS for the end. So Anaga, would you be so kind to introduce NMCATECH and also tell us how the NMCATECH solution is integrated into the Clean by Design program?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anaga and I am with NMCATECH. NMCATECH is an internationally accredited service provider for the global textile, footwear, and the chemical industry. We provide services in areas of quality, sustainability, and chemicals management, mainly being training. This we offer is training, and we offer online training through our e-learning platform called Notes. We deliver the training in the form of online content, interspersed with activities and quizzes. So we try and make it as informative and engaging as possible. We have a ready basket of training courses available on restricted substances, chemical management, and sustainability. And we've trained over 10,000 learners in over 40 countries so far. By the ZDSC group of brands as a ZDSC accredited training partner, and we work with brands to develop custom content for their supply chain. We are very excited to be a part of the Apparel Impact Institute's Clean by Design program, and here we will be providing our ZDSC courses through the Notes platform. So thank you for this opportunity, Tamara, and we look forward to interacting with all the other participants.
Thank you so much, Anaga. Lars, would you be so kind to introduce yourself and also the Beehive as a tool, and also how we're going to utilize it within the Clean by Design program?
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. And yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Lars and I'm from GOBLUE. GOBLUE is a global sustainability service provider for the fashion and textile industry. We're providing brand, supply chain, and level services and communication to clients around the globe. Yeah, and GOBLUE also, and that's why we're here, developed the Beehive. The Beehive is a very innovative chemical management platform, and we're happy to support the Clean by Design project with that. What is special about the Beehive, it allows user to easily create chemical inventories by using a smartphone app, and then to check and improve the MRSL compliance via the desktop platform, and work on overall chemicals management through it. And as an approved ZDHC service provider, the Beehive also allows a user to create a ZDHC performance in-check report. So it helps factories to reduce time, energy, and money, and supports the overall chemical management of the factory. So right now, the Beehive is already used by over 1,600 factories in 30 countries and by more than 40 brands. So we're also looking very much forward to be part of the project and hope we can contribute to the success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lars. So last but not least, let me quickly speak about sustainable textile solutions. We as a company are very well known for our subject matter expertise in the areas of textile and leather wet processing, dyeing, and textile chemistry. We have been working with the Apparel Impact Institute to develop the pilot program for the chemistry and wastewater program. That's why we are also today having the role we are having, and you see us quite strongly involved in that work and managing the program for the time being. We are also a ZDHC accredited training provider and a contributor, but also an SIC affiliate. So we have quite a good experience how to align any programs with the current industry standards. Can you go to the next slide, Brian? What I want to show you, and what I feel is very special about the Clean by Design program, is that we are actually having a very senior expertise on the program. So this is just an example of the next cohort and the team members that we could win for this program. And the first 3 persons are from Sustainable Textile Solutions. Then we have Anna Gernimka, who is the director, and Anne, who's a director for GOBLUE. And they bring a lot of expertise. They bring a lot of on-the-ground expertise into the program, which I feel is very important. And even if we go to other countries, the type of teams you're going to see will be very similar. Of course, you will see other names, but what we are looking for is really the senior experts being on the program. Next slide, please. So now I'm having the great pleasure to introduce you to my colleague, Dr. Siva. Dr. Siva Parikh is a very knowledgeable person. So I'm always calling him the priest of chemical management. That's how I got to know him. And then now I'm working with him for many years. He has been very integral in developing the program and has also worked on the pilot and now helped the program to develop into the model phase. And he will now really introduce the program in detail to you. So Siver, the stage is yours. And Brian, next slide, please.
Thank you, Tamara. So let me explain how these best practices were actually introduced or been created. You can click Brian. So the best practices actually, when it all started, it was very difficult because we had the history and legacy of the 10 best practices coming from NRDC on energy. And on the same lines, we need to create 10 best practices for chemicals as well as wastewater coming out from all apparel or probably footwear as well. So the challenge was that to create simple, identifiable, trackable, scalable options and possibilities for which can fit all possible wet processing units. It could be exhaust dyeing, continuous dyeing, or printing. Variable. These are the variables. The inputs are variable, and even the wastewater treatment plants are variable. So the technologies are different, and the types of wastewater treatment plants are different. So that was a big challenge. And when it came out, we could create 10 best practices which are adaptable, practical, achievable with quantitative results, trackable and measured in transparent way with the tools which are created. And then most importantly, that is probably the most important USP of this particular program, is it is facilitating behavioral change, which means that this program understands the importance of the people and the human element in the factory. And that is how, the next slide please, and that is how this program is creating the engineering, the technology, the chemistry, plus the psychology, because without that psychological element, we will not create the impact. We will not be able to see the change when it comes to chemistry, when it comes to a chemical change in a recipe. You can never say to a facility or a factory manager who is working there for 25 years and say that, oh, this particular recipe is not going to work. In direct sense, it's not going to work. Even if it is not going to work, you cannot just say that it is not going to work, because that is not going to change the behavioral change. So we need to say that it would work probably, but that is also another possibility. Why don't you try? So it's not that the energy, the information what you have, but it is how you put that information to make sure that the impact is created. So that element is also been tried, and that is what is probably the most important aspect in this program.
Yeah, and see, I think from the history, how we know each other, I was always, the first time we worked on another program together, and I was always thinking, oh my God, he's drinking tea the whole time. But I think that drinking tea was actually that ingredient that helped you to drive the change in the facility, because it's a lot about the relationship and then really understanding and what is really the case, and differentiating and perceiving each facility as an individual facility with its strengths and also opportunities, versus doing the same approach to every facility, where we are still having those universal set of 10 best practices, right? So so at the beginning, I always thought like, oh my God, he's bringing me to a factory and we're just drinking tea. Best part of it, I don't understand a word because you didn't even speak English. So that's my experience. But then I've worked with you now for 3.5 years, and what I can see is that you manage with this, actually giving this time and the space to the facilities. You're really able to drive the change, right? And I think that's a very important part that we also saw in the pilot, that it is a transformation process, which does take time.
Yeah. It is basically main important aspect is to understand why a facility is doing that particular recipe in that particular fashion. So there is a reason behind every action. That is the assumption, or that's the axiom which we think that probably the facility is doing this because of some reason. And without pointing out it is wrong or right, just give them that space that, oh, you are fantastic, you have been there for 25 years, and then let me understand better about why you are doing it, because I wanted to learn. And that is how the chat starts. If you don't create that space, there is already a prejudice, and then they are going to have tea, and then you go, and then they will do their job. Life goes on, and the project will continue, and the project will not give you any measurable result. Measurable results probably will be shown on paper, but it will not be impact. So that's the where we need to create some difference in the attitude, that you give them the space, understand them, and create that bond and the atmosphere in such a way that this process and program and the people are for bettering my performance, and if they are going to help the facilities to improve rather than pointing out fingers that finally it will be a problem for my own job. So that couldn't be, because if you show a facilities top management that there's a huge amount of possibility of improvement, the facility management will finally think that that means that these so many years these people are making loss, and that should not be the case. So we need to create that atmosphere in such a way that things are fine, but there's a possibility, etc., etc. And slowly, because our final aim is to create impact, and they need to change. And that we need to understand. That's why I said everything else will work. They all know that there is an issue, but still it will not be that one last point which we don't touch. The things would not be impactful.
Yes, I can see that. So the cornerstones of the Clean by Design chemistry program is a set of 10 best practices, right?
Yeah.
They are practical, low cost, and easy to implement. In the pilot program, we actually started off with 20 best practices. And now, Brian, you can move on to the next slide. We can actually see that it's 10 best practices, and some have merged. And for some of them, we have really also understood. The pilot took us 2 years because of COVID, right? The CdHC has evolved, the CdHC has more tools, and we have really worked and carved out 10 best practices that can be very well aligned with the Supplier to Zero program of the CdHC, as well as really drive impact on site. And they fit facilities which are more at the beginning of their journey, and also facilities that still have quite a matured chemical management system and quite good chemical management practices. So as you're the expert on this, and I think it's a very good opportunity here, would you run us through the 10 best practices? Because I think always when we look at them and just look at the name, that's not enough, right? That doesn't tell us enough about what that really should mean on a facility level.
Yeah, so getting the 10 best practices out of 20 best practices was also an important challenge. But of course, during the pilot, we understood that some of them can be managed and can be merged and all. So that give us the time. So this is the 10 final best practices which you can think of for chemical use and wastewater management. And the first one is, the starting point is to have chemical inventory management. It's as the name suggests, it is chemical inventory management and not chemical inventory log or chemical inventory requirements. It is supposed to be management. That means you need to already have the established system of CMS, policies, purchasing policies, safety data sheets in place, and then create the information coming out of safety data sheets into an inventory sheet, which is probably the progressive, or at least a progressive of level of the ZDHC CIL. Once you have that information, then we need to create the management policy systems out of that chemical inventory. So that is the first cornerstone of the the 10 best practices, which means you create inventory in such a way that you can manage your chemicals, including production planning. So then the second one is improve chemical selection. So once you create your inventory and you understand that which are the chemicals, what are they and how are they behaving, and what is the maximum load creating chemical, what is the maximum, how many chemicals are there which are actually having higher health and safety risks or higher classifications and hazard profiles, etc. You then need to identify how to improve. So once you create the information and management system, then we need to look at how can we improve by creating new chemical selection. That means we're not just talking about MRSL compliant chemicals, but also talking about how to reduce the loads on effluent, and also reduce the load of toxicity and exposure levels. So that is how the second cornerstone will work on, that you are looking at how to reduce the effluent loads of COD or nitrogen or phosphorus or AOX, etc. And then once you do that, you then see how matching the recipe with usage. It is a simple system which everyone says that we are having it. So this is basically increasing the right first time. So in a way, we are talking about increasing the right first time to reduce the redundancies, reduce the wastages, improve the capacities, and reduce the time losses, increase the productivity, and reduce the overall KPIs of water use or energy use or carbon dioxide use through the recipe management. So once you have the recipes, then we need to see how much the mill is actually following and using it by trackable methodologies, and see what is the gap and how to reduce the further losses. Expected is, on paper, everyone are supposed to have 500 grams to be added, but we need to see whether the 500 grams is added by weight or by volume, or is it really 500, or it is little bit more is also fine. These kind of things which we need to also look into. Then we talk about optimized equipment size and capacity. So this is basically production planning. So it's a huge amount of task which needs to be looked at to increase the capability of the mill personnel to see what is to be produced and what is the available resources which they have, like a dyeing machine or a printing machine or a stentors, and then see how do you plan so that you reduce the amount of time time delays, and also queuing opportunities, and the losses because of time loss or time lag because of the number of people which are required for dispensing chemicals or etc. So it requires whole amount of planning, and that is what we need to look into. It's not just what is available now, just load it and then run it. That's not how we need to look into. So it is little bit of in-depth analysis of production planning exercise. Then the fifth one, which is little tricky, is recover and reuse. Yeah, with little challenging. That's where you said even the best chemical management following mills also have this 4 and 5 as the challenging ones, because it's not an easy job. So I have seen many big mills who are having auto dispensing systems, overhead controller systems, etc. But they are not planned in such a way that they are not looking at how many minutes they require for dispensing this chemical, and what should be the ideal way of dispensing it, where should be the controller systems should be placed, etc. Because we have seen that the amount, there is a lag. Ideally they need 20 minutes, but because of the dispensing system and the length at which it needs to travel, probably it is taking 35 minutes instead of 20 minutes. So it's all that kind of nuance which needs to be looked at. And when it comes to recover and reuse chemical inputs, it is that where is the possibility of chemicals to be reused there itself, and not to send the wastewater to the wastewater treatment plant. And how you can.
But we had that during the pilot, right, Siva? Do you want to maybe share? Because I found that very impressive when I look at the pilot result, that we actually had a mill who looked into two areas for exactly this best practice. So yeah. I was not sure when we set up the program if that's something that will be implemented, but it was, right? So do you want to share the example from the factory?
One of the mill, it was a challenge again, it was having a effluent treatment plant and Geraldi as well. And in one of the mill, they were having high amount of loads coming in, and we identified that the mercerization which they are doing is of a low concentration. And when they are looking at this low concentrated mercerization is going into the effluent treatment plant, it is increasing the load. So what we did is that the loads are increased and concentrated. Instead of sending that to effluent treatment plant, we have actually evaporated using the same multiple effect evaporator which they are having in the ZLD. So basically, it's a simple pipeline designs which we did, and they could actually generate the salt and the alkali which is coming out from this low concentrated mercerization using the same equipment and infrastructure which they are having without having another caustic recovery plant. It's basically a caustic recovery plant mirror which we created by careful design of a pipelines and the reuse of the process chemical. That is one. Because they have the ME already. So that is one example I would give. Another example is in the same mill which has actually recovered some water, reused it by simple treatments like filtrations, and gave added more alkali, converted the reactive dye into water, colored water, and the color will not go onto the fabric because it is not reaching the temperature where the dyeing will happen. So then this water is having the salt, so the reduction of salt also is taken place. So most of the times the major concentration of the best practices is how I can reduce the load of the effluent treatment plant. It could be COD, it could be TDS. Major job is TDS because we wanted to reduce the load to going to the landfill, because salt is ultimately going to the landfill. In fact, in another example, which is not recover and reuse, but it is recycle and reuse, where the salt which is converting going into the wastewater treatment plant, earlier they were having huge amount of loss because they could only recover 40% of the salt and the remaining 60% is going to the landfill. But what happened after our intervention is that they could isolate these two, like sodium sulfate and sodium chloride and others. So out of the 60%, they could actually reuse 40% more. That means 80% of salt is recovered, only 20% is going to the waste into the landfill. And in this 80%, the sodium sulfate pure and sodium chloride pure is being separated and reused. So these are some things which are good, I would say, but this requires little bit of engineering. It requires little bit of piping and engineering requirements and willpower if they wanted to do it. And then that is what actually it was very good that we could excite the mill management and they did it. And we have very good numbers to show there. These are from two different mills, which I would say, but 4 and 5 is little advanced. Unless you have a very good system and right first time in place, I would not probably suggest that 4 and 5 should be tried. Then we go into enhanced communication, which is very simple, people will think, but this is probably the most important cornerstone for a good operation. I would say it is a good operation of an effluent treatment plant. You see, everyone in the whole industry, even today, they feel that effluent treatment plant manager is supposed to do his job, whatever, and production manager feels that it is my right to produce, and whatever is discharged, it is his responsibility to treat. So the right to produce is the production manager, responsibility to treat is the effluent treatment plant manager, and they are not in the equal communication levels. No one will involve production ETP manager to see that can you treat this if I am getting it. That question no one will ask. So you have a production planning before, you know what is going to be produced 7 days before, or maybe sometimes 15 days before, and you will not give that production planning sheet to the effluent treatment plant person so that he can predict what is the load which is going to come tomorrow. So he can be responsive rather than reactive. So this communication between the key personnel, which we have to actually involve effluent treatment plant person, and actually in my view, the best chemical management system will be in those mills where the effluent treatment plant person will sign off every new chemical coming in and will sign off every production planning sheet that I have seen it and I know what is coming in. So that kind of transparent systems need to be prepared so that the effluent treatment plant person can prepare himself, because at the end he has only 3 or 4 tools: the valves, which he can only open or close because he can only do that much, or he can change the pH little bit here and there with 2 or 3 chemicals, or he will probably add little bit color water or color removing chemical or anything else. So he has no other magic wand. So he need some more information to be prepared. So that is what I think enhancing chemical communication, which is very important tool. Then managing key process waste streams. This means you need to know, actively monitor every single waste stream so that you know which is the highest concentration. That's what which made us to actually think twice to recover that alkali from that low concentrated mercerization, because I didn't want that mercerization water to go into effluent treatment plant and generate salt, because every alkali will ultimately end up as salt, and this salt needs to be evaporated again. So you are generating salt and you are evaporating it in the factories in India, at least, because where you have ZLDs. So it makes more sense for me to recover it before, instead of actually evaporating it after the treatment is over. And this waste stream management and tracking them to ensure that the capacities and the ETP designs are accordingly managed, or once you have already designed, then you need to ensure that the design is being met properly by these waste streams. So you need to have that control if you don't have a design in your place. Some of the times, many times, we are given the ETP, we have to run it. We are not asked to design it. So in most of the mills, design of ETP is designed, but processes will change. Chemicals will change. ETP will not change. So that is why it is very important for us to ensure that the ETP operational person has some more leverage to ensure that the ETP operation is in place. That's why you will see more of the best practices are more towards the effluent treatment plant operations. The next one is also influent temperature. Very simple, but very important. You should understand what is the high temperature gradients, what are all the discharge water streams, and what is the temperature, so that you can control the temperature in such a way that you can at least recover the energy as much as possible. And finally, you should ensure that the effluent treatment plant will have a proper temperature to treat, because little higher temperature can also increase your load on effluent treatment plant, and also increase the concentration of chemicals which you are using, because solubility increases. And what we are doing is coagulation, flocculation in the physicochemical treatment. And at higher temperature, the amount of chemical needed to coagulate the same amount of the load will multiple times it will increase. So we need to ensure that the temperature of the effluent treatment plant water is in such a, it is as low as possible, so that I will use the less chemicals to get my sludge out. Otherwise, it is increasing tremendously, and COD loads increases tremendously. And then monitor wastewater influent and effluent. Monitoring the influent to ensure the effluent discharge quality parameters are met is a very important aspect. This is also very important for planning, production planning. So you need to link to 4 in such a way that the 9 can be managed, because if the influent water is fluctuating, you cannot have a constant effluent parameters. So that is where you need to monitor, you need to ensure that you are treating and taking the right steps to ensure that the effluent treatment water is meeting exactly same parameters of foundational at all given times, and ensure that not a single drop of wastewater is discharged without treatment. So that is very important. It's an operational excellence which we need to ensure, and they need to have an in-house monitoring system. You cannot say that, okay, 2 times in a year we are testing and at that time we will monitor. That's not the case. You need to do it every day, in fact every hour. And the last one is preparedness for emergency. So we are expecting that everything is in place. However, and the principle what I said, that you cannot expect even 1 drop of water at any given point of time to go without treatment and meeting the effluent discharge norms, which means I need to have emergency plan. And what are the emergency plans? Is it going to be equipment, or it is going to be an additional tank, or is it going to be stoppage of water process? Everything. The plan needs to be prepared, SOP needs to be created. And many times I have seen SOPs, but people also don't know what to do. There are only papers, but the the production manager do not know, and the effluent treatment plant person do not know what to do. So this kind of emergency preparedness is only on paper, will not work. So we need to ensure that all the people are fully aware of what needs to be done when it comes to this. So that kind of preparedness plan is also supposed to be there as a best practice. So these are our 10 best practices.
Yes, and I will tell you now about the transformation process. So after Siva was explaining in detail each of those best practices, let me just quickly show you how we are getting there. And Brian, you can, we spoke about this, right? And now we spoke about this before because Siva spoke about that verbally, and then we can take the next slide and I run you through the transformation process and also how the ZDHC tools are going to fit in here. So on the next slide, you will see that we are speaking about a 13-month program. And we are doing that we are really having sufficient time to achieve the project goals. As you all know, certainly from change management projects in your company, so there's this process of change, right? Everybody's happy, something is changing. Then you come to this point where you are maybe not so happy anymore until you're slowly implementing and then achieving a goal. And we need to give this time. So we have set the program in a way that we start with a kickoff to attain the commitment. We do a pre-visit and collect the first information, just that we have an idea of who are we talking to, right? Then we start to engage with the top management and have an expert discussion. And very early, because it's quite not always, but sometimes it's a very comprehensive or time-consuming process for the facilities, we start looking into collecting all information for the chemical inventory so that we can manage the chemical inventory and we are not just having a stock list. So that's something we're starting at the beginning, as well as the e-learning of the ZDHC technical industry guideline and wastewater trainings. Only then we start with the first visit. So by then the facilities have a certain knowledge, we have got to know them a little bit, and then we go there and visit them. From the first visit where we set a baseline that will further help us also to measure the impact we have created. We have a lot of action points that are related to technical training, one-on-one consultancy engagement, reviews. We will use the ZDHC in-check reports in order to see really what is the MRSL performance of the chemicals. We regularly update the chemical inventory and we remind the factories to do that to create a certain habit. And around mid-time, we also help the factories, if they haven't yet done it, to meet the supplier to zero foundational level. Later, we prepare them also for the progressive level. And we are doing the validation of the in-check report. Overall, it's 13 months. It's quite a heavily packed program where there's a lot of stuff happening. It's very intense for the factory. It's very intense for the consultant. But we feel it's also very important because that helps to build the relationship and drive change. After 13 months, we recognize also the achievements, and we have a separate slide on this. I think it's important, and you can jump to the next slide, to now really show you how AAI worked with the ZDHC to gain endorsement of the Clean by Design chemistry program. So Klaas, would you like to speak about the supply to zero level, the tools used, and how that links actually to the 10 best practices?
Yes, thank you, Tamara. I think it's very important to realize that this improvement program, Clean by Design, is really helping facilities to use the platforms and tools that are available to the industry. So when you look at this map, you will see that there's one column on supplier to zero, and that the use of ZDHC platforms and solutions will not only ensure that that factories will learn to implement the ZDHC chemical management technical industry guide, so our core how to ZDHC guideline, But they will also make sure that facilities will master this journey on the roadmap to zero. So we will make sure that the factories will have access to the ZDHC gateway and thereby also to Supplier to Zero. And Supplier to Zero is our program to, well, empower the factory to learn how to ZDHC at its own pace. And Clean by Design will basically accelerate this learning process and intensify it. So successful factories will be able to get the ZDHC Supplier to Zero foundational level certificate, and will be further empowered by Clean by Design to master also Supplier to Zero progressive level, and receiving that certification as well in the process or after completing the Clean by Design program. And in order to ensure that the Clean by Design activities dealing with chemical inventories, we will go even further than simply providing access to the gateway. We will make sure that this program also reflects ZDHC best practices and is working towards and beyond the conformity within the ZDHC MRSL. So this means that in terms of chemical selection, the Beehive will enable the factories to review the chemical inventories conformance via a ZDHC performance in check, which will then also be verified by the STS staff on site. And since wastewater related Clean by Design activities are also based on the ZDHC wastewater guideline, it makes sense that the factories and brands are recommended to benefit from the approved ZDHC process in using an approved laboratory for testing, uploading the results to the gateway, and getting the Clearstream report accordingly. And Tamara already mentioned that with the training activities going on, there's a clear connection to the ZDHC Academy, and the participating factories will be able to access the exam and potentially earn also the certificates in wastewater management and technical industry guide training, which is really awesome. Next slide, please. So what does it mean in terms of starting points and also where the factories are going to be guided to? So I think Tamara will also explain this further, but we had a look at this and we agreed that there are certain prerequisites or pre-requirements that would be beneficial. But in the end, we think that the program can support the factories to get to the level that is expected. Nonetheless, some of the ZDHC tools are a good indicator for a certain maturity of the factory. Tamara, would you like to start here, maybe before I go into the details?
Well, but I think you're basically saying it. We have been sitting together, we have been thinking, what do we make mandatory, what don't we make mandatory, what are the prerequisites? And we really want to give every factory the opportunity to join the program, even if they haven't advanced very much on their ZDHC journey. So of course we appreciate certain tools, but we don't expect them. We also look into alternatives if those tools are not used, and we found, for example, if there is no performance in check report, we can certainly work very well already with the chemical inventory and advance it further. And at the end of the day, the factory should have a performance in check report. And that's kind of how we run it with all the ZDHC tools. So you can continue, class, because I think the most important part really is we don't expect anything at the beginning, but we get facilities really ready for that journey.
Exactly. So with the factory signing up to the process, they will have access to the ZDHC gateway, and thereby also have access to Supplier to Zero and our supplier platform. And the Supplier to Zero foundational guidance material, so our How to ZDHC material, will provide them with guidance every day. So they can go through this if they have questions, if they need to have certain templates that are also required or recommended for the progress in Clean by Design, they can find it in there. And this is like really necessary in some cases, because even advanced factories have often these smaller implementation gaps. And this might not come to the surface of investigation from the first baseline assessment of the program, but at a certain point they are stuck because some kind of SOP, some kind of template, some kind of information is not available. And I think we all agree that data and information gathering is sometimes really challenging. And so we hope that with Supplier to Zero Foundational, the factories will learn about all these smaller bits and pieces that are necessary to have a solid foundation for the progress that they can achieve with Clean by Design. And Supplier to Zero is kind of helping them build this foundation. So, of course, also in going down the items, it would be appreciated if the factories already have a performance in check. But as Tamara explained, chemical inventories are a good starting point, but it needs to be the right type of chemical inventory. And in the due process of Clean by Design, I think the team can support the improvement of the chemical inventory tremendously. And so I think I leave it here to provide us a little bit more space also for the last slides and maybe a little Q&A. But if there's more questions about the ZDHC toolbox, I will put my my email address in the chat box.
Thank you, Klaas. I wanted to emphasize that the ZDHC tools are partly already included from a cost perspective into the program. So the Supplier to Zero foundational level, the validation of the in-check, the ZDHC tick and wastewater training, they are already included in the pricing. So there are no extra costs. We have not included the in-check report itself because many factories already use it and we didn't want to make a double payment for them and didn't want them to change when they are already using a service provider. Nevertheless, we are working with Lives and the Beehive, and we can always get the factories to use the in-check with Beehive. Okay, then a very important point, I think, is the recognition. So that's our last and final slide. And you have to push the button a few times, Brian, because somehow, yeah, we did this to it. But I think it's very important to just tell you what is the recognition and the results. So we have two baskets of recognition and results. The one side is the brands and the retailers, and then we have the mills. So the brands and the retailers, they get the aggregated impact reporting from AII. The mill achievements count towards the ZDHC brands to Zero program, and Klaas will speak about that in a second. And of course, there's an opportunity for storytelling together with the AII. We can always talk how we tell the story of the brand, how they have worked with their supply chain. Then the mills, they actually have a broad portfolio of recognition. So there is the certificate stating the program performance. We will certainly award top performers. There are the ZDHC tick and wastewater training certificates, given the participants pass the exam. There will be the ZDHC validated in-check report, the ZDHC Supplier to Zero foundational level. And Klaas, you need to tell me if it's a certificate as well. And of course, the promotion. So Klaas, can you just, again, say a little bit about the recognition from the ZDHC side?
Yeah, so for the factories, the in-check and Clearstream as well as Supplier to Zero will be visible also in the gateway to the brand customers. So that's adding tremendous values for the factories. And also we see that many fairs are now asking for these certificates to be available, or how far suppliers are advancing on this. So yeah, these are kind of certificates, whereas the Clearstream and the in-check are rather performance reports than certificates, but they are valued almost as much as the certificate. Brands to Zero, on the other hand, for the brands and retailers, is our standardized ZDHC leader program for the brands. So every brand that is a contributor of ZDHC is participating in this. It provides a clear set of KPIs to evaluate the brand's performance on ZDHC implementation. And brands that collaborate on the Clean by Design program can have benefits from the program in terms of supply chain implementation, in-depth working with the suppliers, and getting also inspiration and impulses for further and broader rollout to their supply chain. So I think brands to zero recognition is a very important part, but even beyond, Clean by Design can help brands also to sort out things in terms of broader supply chain rollout.
Thanks. So thanks, class. Brian, I'm now handing over to you because I'm done with the program part. And thank you for giving me so much time to speak.
You're welcome, and thank you everyone who participated today, and for those who joined us. In the interest of time, I realize we're at time. If you do have any questions, you'll see email contact here on the slide. Please go ahead and shoot me an email directly, or Tamara, and we'll go ahead and be in touch to answer specific questions. We will make both the slides and this presentation available to everyone who attended and those who were unable to attend. So we thank you, the presenters. We look forward to future participation and recruitment as we look out to not only December, but into early next year for facility participation. And with that, I am going to go ahead and end the webinar. Again, questions, go ahead and submit those via email, and we will follow up and be in touch. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Brian.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Elena.
Bye.